Along with their blue chippers, Washington's got some talented under-the-radar stars.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Lars, we got a really exciting show here for the Everydayers today. We're going to be talking about some NIL, some of the comments that, Kirby Smart's made, and we'll get down that road. We're also going to talk about some of the toughest games on Washington's schedule during their first year in the Big Ten because, hey, the whiteout is happening. Washington is playing in the whiteout. That's going to be so sick. I'm so excited for that. But we're going to be talking about some of the underrated commits who can turn into stars because we got a lot of questions about this. We're going to do a whole different topic on guys that we think can earn a fourth star. So where do you want to go with this? There are a whole lot of talented 3-stars in this class.
So I'm going to start in-state, and I'm going to start on the defensive side of the ball to be very clear because there's a couple of guys we could choose. And I know there's one that you're going to talk about later. But the one that intrigues me the most, no disrespect to the one you're going to talk about, is Victor Sanchez Hernandez. When we look at the ranking that he has, he's pretty far down in the state on the 247 rankings. But when you turn on the tape, you can see where Jason Kafusi is looking long term. You can see in a couple of years. I talked to Victor Sanchez Hernandez after his commitment. This is another guy. He has a Taekwondo background. I just can only imagine when he fills out, gets into his body a little bit more. And he, to be fair, also did just start playing football, back in high school. So he's new to the game, relatively speaking, in that regard. So by no means is he a guy that you would expect to come in even year one, not even day one, but year one and be a factor. He's a guy where it's almost like a draft and stash in the NBA, where you draft a guy from overseas, stash him for a couple of years, let him get his body right. And wow, all of a sudden in year 2 or year 3, Victor Sanchez Hernandez is actually in the rotation. And the key here, he might be inside an interior option and not just an edge option. I think if he grows into that body, he could. I know you share that same sentiment, but I think he might. Well, so he's probably still going to start out on the edge just see if he can become a run-setting edge. And if he can, I think that's actually almost a perfect transition to slide inside at that point. And when you look at how the roster is built out with depth-wise, there's so many options at edge. You don't, Jade Way. We can go down. We can run down the list of edges at this point,
like we did on yesterday's show.
Exactly. Go check it out. But even more for that reason, you need to stack bodies inside. And I think anytime you can get a guy with his size at 6'5",
245, I think is what he's listed at right now. Yeah.
Again, well, high school listings and stats are so hit or miss. But I think to your point, if he gets up to 255, in that ballpark, because you don't want him to get 275 because that's almost too big. Because he does, I think, when he gets in the right coaching, he could show a little bit more added pass rush that he hasn't shown in the high school level. But I think either way, it's a good kind of stash and draft and stash. Get yourself a big body that you can pair down the road and keep an in-state kid.
So I really like where you're going with this because I'm going to talk about Dominic Mcone here in a second, but two things that I wanted to hit on. The first thing was I wasn't really aware of his Taekwondo background until after his commitment. I know you talked about it, Brandon Huffman talked about it, and that was something where I said, okay. And once I heard that, I went back and I watched this film and I watched it a little bit differently, where the first thing that stuck out to me was you're absolutely right. And this is no slight on him because he just started playing football in high school. He's somebody who, when you watch his film, you can tell he hasn't gotten a lot of advanced coaching yet. And again, that's okay because Dominic McCone's kind of in the same boat where somebody's got a wrestling background and goes to a very new high school. So it's the same thing. That's kind of why I wanted to tie these two together. But with both these guys, their backgrounds in other sports really shows up in sports that are so physical and just so important with technique in different ways that if you can figure out how to coach it, you can figure out how to refine it on the football field, boom, you've got yourself somebody who at the very least can be a solid contributor, especially with the frames that we're talking about with these guys. And I think that with Sanchez Hernandez, if he can continue to work on his foot speed, which is something that I think he truly can do from his background in Taekwondo, that he's somebody who, I personally think that I'd move him to the interior a whole lot more than I play him on the edge, especially just with all the other guys that are in that room right now. But with somebody like Dominic Mcone, you can say a lot of very similar things where, like I said, wrestling background, state champion, undefeated wrestler last year down in Oregon, and somebody who really has flown under the radar for one reason or another. I think it is kind of due to a lack of coaching. And again, that's not necessarily his fault. And I don't even want to slight the staff down at his high school either, because it's a new high school. You go through a lot of those growing pains very early on in any career like that. So I don't want to slight anybody when I'm saying that, because that's certainly not my intention. But you look at somebody like that and you say, why doesn't this guy have more offers? Where you see all the makings of what a 4-star defensive tackle is. And I personally don't think he's somebody who's going to get a 4th star by the end of the cycle. But I think when I look at him, he's somebody who, when I watch him, I say, oh yeah, no, this is a guy who has all of the tools to be a major difference maker. And I'm really excited for what those could look like with a year or two under Jason Kafusi and Steve Belichick.
Exactly. And I think the one thing that both those coaches have talked so much about is projectability. And that's exactly what these first two guys do. Similar to where I would go again on the defensive side with Rannell Adams out of Texas. You got a 6'1" cornerback, probably 150, 160, dripping wet, soaking wet towel sort of thing. If he's a guy where you want him to add, again, you can have a light cornerback, but especially when you're going into the Big Ten, you need to add some muscle to your frame. And we've seen guys come in over the years, even in the Pac-12 level, where we're like, hey, these guys have great ball skills, but they're going to get blown off the line. And I'm not saying Ramon would necessarily get blown off the line, but when you're that light, it's kind of almost asking for it. But the one thing that we've hit on in the show that actually I talked with Chris Lawson about, and he made this kind of intriguing comment to me. It was like, I'm surprised more cornerbacks don't turn and track the ball more. I'm like, well, as somebody who has never played football, I couldn't imagine running a 4.4 and also trying and keeping pace. So it's not as easy as the armchair quarterbacks make it look. But Rannell Adams makes it look so easy, and I think that's why there's so much upside with this take, because we initially talked about it, like, why are we going and flipping a Texas Tech, commit? Like, what's the angle here? And then you turn on the tape, and you see, oh, okay. Not even John Richardson can coach those eyes, but you would have to imagine getting to work with John Richardson and the rest of this defensive coaching staff, that he could easily gain that weight and already come in with such a high football IQ that the only thing that might hinder his early playing time and in a way his ranking is just his size. And just if he's 6'1", 185, I don't think we're having this discussion, because he's able to play at a different level, have a little more physicality. And thus, he might even get a 4-star. Being in Texas, almost a 3-star in Texas could be a 4-star anywhere else. I know I've said that on a previous show, but I'm not afraid to say it again. And Ramon's is kind of that prototypical guy where you look at the ball skills are kind of the one thing that I think John Richardson looks for the most. Can you make plays? Can you take the ball away? We can work with the rest. We can get you in the scheme. We can figure out the rest there. But for me, I don't know. Again, this is a kind of to be determined class in terms of what the quarterbacks are going to look like. But I think that's a sneaky good addition for this class. Again, maybe 18 to 24 months. And once you get into the weight room, gain a little bit more muscle, and then we'll see how he fully fills out that frame.
No, I really like your thought process with all that, because I agree. And I think there's a Big Ten factor to consider there, where if Ramon's is, listed at 180, 185, you're right. This is a different discussion. And the last guy I wanted to hit on here really quickly was Coleman Brussa, where he's rated right now as the lowest recruit in Washington's class. And I think that is malpractice, personally. Watching this guy's tape, his feet, the way he moves, just everything about him, it screams future high caliber lineman, where I'm not going to go out and set any kind of expectations for him. But this is somebody who I think has been really underrated to this point in the cycle. And I feel like at a certain point he's been overlooked because his brother Derek is such a highly rated player in the 2026 class. So I feel like just there really hasn't been any attention on him, but when you watch his film, you see somebody who I think can hang at tackle. I know we've talked with our buddy Ben Glassmeyer about that as well, but can play guard at a really high level thanks to his just elite lower half and the way he can move his feet and just the way he mirrors rushers. And yeah, he's doing it against the lower level of competition guys in the Metro League, and no slight to the Metro League, but it's not like playing high school football in Texas or playing in the Trinity League. It's not necessarily the same. And I feel like some of these evaluators might be trying to overcompensate with that at this point. But he's somebody who I think is going to be a major riser over the course of his senior year. And Lars, with that being said, Washington's going to be playing in the whiteout, and I am so excited about that. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, because I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And, shout out to Major League Baseball for the All-Star game, everything that's going on with that, because Paul Skeens, who we've been pushing here for a while for Rookie of the Year, I really think it might be time to start putting in some Cy Young bets for this guy, because he looks like a cheat code across the league right now, and he's pitching 11 games. It's so much fun to see, and I definitely go check out his odds over on FanDuel. Lars, I know I've said it before. I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to keep saying it. The fact that Washington in their first year in the Big Ten is going to go to Penn State and get the whiteout game is so cool. That's so exciting. And it's a real nice welcome to the Big Ten moment. Also, really horrifying when you think about how good that Penn State team might be this year. But it really got us thinking. This is certainly now the toughest game on Washington's schedule, in my opinion, where, I'd rate Oregon a couple spots lower because it's a game they've played in a lot. Like I feel like doesn't lose any luster in the rivalry in that sense, but a whiteout first year in the Big Ten against a Penn State defense that could be one of the 5-10 best in the nation. I think that this is far and away the toughest game that UW is going to have to play in this season.
See, I agree. I just want to take a different angle because, again, sure, you're not wrong. Because when you look at how, and especially how the game sets up, where the week before you're at home against USC, there's a lot of questions around USC. Now, Penn State was probably better than USC at this point going into the season. The question for Penn State is going to be, do they have the offense? I know we talked about that, but I think just for what the Oregon game is, and I think this is actually a good litmus test to see which one is going. Are these East Coast games going to be bigger and more impactful, or is it going to be the traditional West Coast, formerly Pac-12 games against Oregon, UCLA, and USC? I still think for what the Oregon rivalry is, and given the fact that you beat them a couple years now, let's say if you lose to Oregon this year and you beat Penn State, then we can start having the discussion of, okay, maybe there's actually more of an onus to get up for some of these big games. And I know, to your point, a lot of the players, when they saw that there was going to be the whiteout, I know Justin Harrington was like, I bet, all right, the game just got turned up to 11. Like, now we're coming for this one. And there's a lot, I think, not necessarily riding on the season, but these are all kind of laying the foundations. The one sneaky game, it's not the toughest in terms of opponent and everything like that. It's just the sneakiest game that I think is going to prove to be the toughest. I don't really have a rationale for it, but it's one of those. It's a different type of Big Ten test, where Oregon's a different Big Ten test than USC. They're not even close, right? In terms of Washington's played both those schools recently, and let's be real, Oregon's far and above where Lincoln Riley is at this point. But Iowa's really kind of that tough school where should it be a win, even though it's in Iowa City and it's on the road? You would think yes. And so I think those type of tough matchups, the ones against Rutgers, might actually prove to be tougher, quote unquote, air quotes right here, year one, than a game like Penn State, because you're going to get up for the Penn State game. That's the thing. You're going to get up for that game. It's going to be a 4-quarter slugfest, no doubt. But for me, it's those games against Rutgers, against Iowa, that might actually prove to be, in the end, tougher when it comes down to it.
So I certainly hear your rationale. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I'm going to just give you a top 3 ranking for me right now in terms of game toughness. Penn State is now the 1 because of the whiteout, where I've got Oregon at 2. And I think that with the Oregon game, obviously there's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of history involved. Yes, as you said, you're right. Washington has beat Oregon 3 straight times, no matter what they might think on Twitter about that. But on top of that, it feels a little bit different to me this year, and not in any sort of bad way, but I feel like the DeBoer Lanning rivalry was a real thing. I think Fish Lanning could give off a similar vibe. I do. We haven't seen it yet. And like, even when I think about that 2022 game where Oregon was favored by 2 touchdowns and they lost, it just didn't give off the same vibe going into that game. If you kind of remember that feeling, like I remember being super excited about it, being super hyped, and it was kind of, all right, this is the litmus test, as you said, for this team. And it was, and we saw it, and we saw what this team could turn into after beating Oregon. And that was great. And I feel like that's kind of why I've got Penn State above it right now. Because not only is Oregon the last game of the season, but I think this is the one that really sets the tone, where you talk about Iowa, you talk about Rutgers. I love your thought process there, because Iowa's probably going to be ranked when those two teams play. I wouldn't be surprised. Rutgers probably won't be, but that's a solid squad. You got to go across the country on a Friday night for sure. Those are both going to be really, really tough matchups. But I think that just Penn State being what it is, if you can go in there and even just show that you can hang, if you pull off an upset, amazing. That's awesome. We love that. But if you can just show that you can go in there and hang in a super hostile environment, just in what, that's shown to be, I just feel like that not only says good things about this team, what Fish's and just coaching staffs, just whatever their wording might be in their team before the game like that, and just how they prepare for something like that. But it also just sets up really well for going to Oregon, in my opinion. And you can only play who's in front of you, right? And you have to play Penn State before you play Oregon. So that's just kind of where I'm going with that. And I just don't want this to feel like I'm slighting the Oregon rivalry at all, because it's not that. I just think that in a new conference, this is what it's about. It's about playing the Michigans, the Ohio States, and the Penn States, because those are the top dogs in the conference right now. And I truly believe that Washington, USC, and Oregon are that tier 2 right now, and that they could very easily be better than the rest of the Big Ten by year 2, year 3. I legitimately believe that. And I think that can start this year.
You're not wrong, and that's what I tried to make clear. I'm basically taking the devil's advocate. You're absolutely
sure,
right.
yeah.
Penn State is the cream of the crop when you look at the schedule. But the fact that it took us 7 minutes to mention Michigan in this segment kind of also says a little bit about the schedule and what to expect from the Big Ten. Because again, Washington and Michigan are both coming in a rebuilding year, but the perception of Michigan and the perception of Washington are not on the same level. I know Husky fans won't be happy to hear that, but that's kind of just the reality. But this is the season to where you were laying all the foundations in the Big Ten for that. If you're able to beat Michigan at home, Michigan will say, it's a down year where it wasn't our best year. Well, this is payback for 21 when Washington had to go to Ann Arbor with Jimmy Lake and laid an absolute egg for no reason with a much more talented roster. Again, no, right? It's a similar thing where, okay, if Michigan's supposedly down, well, Washington was down then. Had you played that game in 22, I think Washington would have certainly held their own and maybe even beat Michigan then. So I think these are kind of all good litmus tests. And we talked about it a little bit. They don't play Ohio State this year. You're dodging some of the games. Obviously, we've proven that Washington can dominate Michigan State. But the one thing that you said is just hang with Michigan or Penn State. Washington has not been blown out by Penn State in the 3 times they played them. I mean, maybe the first game was like 31-7 or whatever, but the last 2, one was 13-10 and one was 35-28 in the Fiesta Bowl. Washington's been able to hang with Penn State. I know this is a bigger test going to Beaver Stadium, going to University Park. I am personally excited. I already got my ticket for that, my airfare for that game, covering the game, got my dad a ticket for the game. It was a good treat. It's like, you know what? When in Rome, we went out to the Michigan game. So it's a good kind of litmus test all around. And I would implore Husky fans to try and go to as many Big Ten games as you can to really understand the culture in the Big Ten. It's one thing I'm sure you've been doing as well, reaching out to people that cover the Big Ten and former players, just understanding, because we both know it's the SEC and the Big Ten. But what is it about the Big Ten that makes it the second one, the culture, everything that goes along to it? It's not just showing up on Saturdays and blowing somebody out against Akron. That doesn't count.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the fun things about this, where I talked to our other Huskies Wire contributor, Alex Katzen. We're heavily considering going to this game because I wanted to try to take at least one road trip this year to go to one of these games and cover it. And I wanted to see if this would be a whiteout game. And the fact that it is so cool and just says so much about, I feel like it says a lot about what Washington stature has become. And just over the last couple of years, where I know all the fans that were around in the 80s and the 90s through the true just golden years of Washington football will say, well, that's what it is. And I agree. I 100% agree that that's what it is and that's what it should be. But it took the country a while to realize that after what the early 2000s were, and even through a good portion of the 2010s, which is really frustrating. Like, I lived in Boston during that time, and it was really frustrating for people to be like, oh, Washington's good? It's like, yeah, like, get on board. Like, that's what the culture was, even when they went to 3 straight New Year's Six games. And to see Penn State kind of, tip the hat where they're playing Ohio State the week before. They said, no, we're going to save that for Washington. I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool. So that's certainly going to be a really fun atmosphere. And I know I said it before, but it's going to be a really cool welcome to the Big Ten sort of moment. And I think that it's going to say so much about what Washington can be in the Big Ten if you can prove that you can go in there and win that game. And Laura, speaking of the Big Ten, NIL is also very, very important in the Big Ten. And Kirby Smart had some very interesting comments about it. So, Lars, as we said, Kirby Smart gave a little shout out, a little dig to Oregon, and all these schools have their own issues, especially the SEC, where, I saw Sua Cravens put it on Twitter. It was fantastic. Said, yeah, the SEC complaining about paying players is rich. I agree. Let's get that out there right now. We certainly agree with this whole pot calling the kettle black sort of thing that's going on here. But at the same point, I feel that all this discourse that has taken place, and we're not going to spend this segment talking about Oregon, because that's not what it is. That's not what the show is. That's not what we're about. But I feel that this national discourse that's gone on around Oregon's NIL and how that has helped propel them to a lot of what it is speaks volumes about what Washington's can be. And when we looked at, when we talked about it the other day, we talked about the Win Big campaign that Motley Futures has going on. We talked about Jed Fish getting involved with that campaign, all those different things. It shows just how important and just how far a good NIL system can take you. And then combine that with Washington's history of developing guys, putting guys in the league, getting guys drafted in the first round, all those sorts of things. If you can get a nice mixture of both, that's one of the reasons, like I said in the last segment, that I believe Washington can be one of the real powers in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's the thing that we kind of, I know we've talked about this a bunch off the air, and just as we got to know each other over the years, where it matters, college football clearly matters to University of Washington alumni, University of Washington fans. How much does it matter is the perfect question for the NIL era. How much does it matter? How much of your money matters to keep this thing going? And I know that not everybody, to be fair, but a lot of people like, oh, I miss the amateur days. I hate that players are getting paid. It's like, well, do you want a good school to be a proud alumni, or do you want to complain on Twitter that people are getting paid? By the way, God forbid an 18 to 22-year-old gets paid for their time. I know it's a crime, but it's not a crime. But that's kind of the point there. But it's speaking to where everything that Washington sells, right? The education matters. Make a 40-year decision, not a 4-year decision.
Right.
Okay. So you're making an investment, much like when you go to be an alumni or to be an undergrad, you're making that investment, whether you're taking out loans, you got a scholarship, or whatever. You're investing time, you're investing money. That investment should still carry over. And it's the same for every school, to be honest, but especially with Washington being in a metro city like Seattle. You have Bellevue, you got Mercer, you got people in California that are UW alums that can come up for the game. So you're not just restricted to the area of Seattle, which in itself is already pretty strong. And again, we don't have to run through the list of companies that are in Seattle. Washington already did that when they kicked off their NIL campaign a couple of years ago. And so it really just gets to put your money where your mouth is. That's really what this is. Where you look at the SEC, I know it's a cliche, but I remember talking with Ryan McGee with ESPN about this. It truly just does matter more. Go spend a couple of months in SEC country, or go for a weekend. Go to a Tennessee game. Go to an Auburn game. And it doesn't have to be Auburn, Alabama. It doesn't have to be Tennessee, Alabama. It doesn't have to be a marquee game. You can go to any SEC game, and it will just matter more. There's everything. The entire city is built around it, where Chris Peterson famously said, we could have 72,000 people a sold out game in September, October, and there will equally be 150,000 people that have no clue in the same city that we're playing. And I think that kind of speaks to the issues that Washington has in terms of trying to cultivate the attention. But after the national championship run, everything is on the table there to cultivate that and grow it. And I think personally, you have the perfect AD to do that with Pat Chung, because Pat's shown what he can do at Washington State, raising money, doing all that. What he can do in Pullman and the right next to the Idaho border, now you give him a metro city, that fund should almost double, in my opinion, over a 12-month span. Obviously not right away, but that there should be a significant amount of uptick, and it shouldn't. Motley Futures is good, but there should be various avenues that this money is coming from, not just the fans. Because as we've said, if you keep reaching into the pot for the same person, eventually that person's going to swat the hand away. It's like, go find somebody else. Go get the money somewhere else. Like, I've given so much money. What's the point?
No, I completely agree with your thought process here and where you're going with that. And I know it's kind of a sore subject for a lot of Husky fans, but that's why Kalen DeBoer leaving for Alabama when he did sucks so much. That's the only way to put it. That's the only way that you can say it, because he brought this program to such a good place. And then it's not on the mountaintop, but it's as close as you can possibly get instead of saying, all right, let's keep building this thing. You want to go somewhere else. You have your own decisions, your own priorities, whatever. That's fine. That's one thing. But it was just such a blow to the program. And it's a bummer to talk about. And I don't know, it put Jedfish in a really tough spot. And, you think about all the turnover that happened after that. You talk about Troy Daniel leaving. You talk about all these people that are leaving. But in a sense that I'm not going to say everything is an upgrade, because I want to see, Jed on the field first before you talk about, upgrading from Kalen. That's a bit of a stretch. Let's be real. I love Jed. I think he's going to have a lot of success here. But I certainly do think that Pat Chun can be an upgrade from what Troy Dannon was, in terms of just the way he did raise money at Wazoo, like you said, and just what Washington can be. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. I remember seeing something on Washington send-off right before the national championship that somebody said, this fan base, this passion is available to the university whenever it wants it. And it's about a complete buy-in. That's what it needs to be. And right now, a lot of that starts on the NIL front. And a lot of teams have a little bit of a head start. And I'm not even talking about Oregon. You can talk about the SEC. You can talk about Ohio State, about Michigan, about what some of those big teams are able to do. But if you are a passionate Husky fan and you want your team to be able to compete with those teams every single year, this is what it's about. It's about adapting or dying in the world of college football. That's what it is. That's where we are. And all of that starts right now with NIL. It
absolutely, it started a couple of years ago, and that's how some of those, transfer additions came to be in the past couple of years, where the transition becomes, where are your resources going, right? I think that's the other side of this coin, where is Washington going to go more into the high school ranks, or are they going to stay sort of in the transfer portal realm, where Jed is saying, I want to build through the high school ranks, but you had to be so dependent on the transfer portal this year. Obviously, I don't think Washington will ever dump all of their resources for NIL into the high school ranks like Oregon would. And I think that's probably a good thing, because you don't want to have a 90-10 or an 80-20 mix. You probably want to say, 70-30, 60-40, maybe 50-50. Like,
I'd go with 70-30. Just in terms of what Jed's mindset is a good argument for that as well.
Exactly. And so when you prioritize certain high school guys, that's why, if you can close on some of these guys that we talked about in the 25 class, that will really set this class up for a top 15, potentially maybe top 10, but I would just conservatively say top 15 is probably that ceiling at this point, where they're at 19 right now, or 17, 19, depending on how the rankings fluctuate. But given who's on the board, I don't see them truly vaulting up into beyond the top 10, but I can see them in the teens. That's certainly with respectability. Oh. But then that only has to continue every single year. It can't just be a one-off year, much like the national championship run, where, again, we've been very clear. This is not a national championship caliber team. It's a decent team. Say 8, 7, 8, 9, potentially 10-win team, depending on if you count the bowl game or not, but probably more so in that 9 range. But what year 2 and year 3 should be for Jed is exactly why the foundation has to be built out, so that money is already in the coffers. And when recruits are coming in 26 for unofficial visits, and you can see the building there versus having to get to next year and say, oh, after Jed's first season, now I'll buy in. I know it's hard to buy in, but given what Jed did with such limited resources at Arizona, plus the transfer portal, so he won't have that rough first year taking over for someone when he went 1-11. He's not going to go 1-11. He's not going to win 4 or 5 games. He should win 6 or 7. The question is it going to be 6, 7, 8, or 9? The more wins you want as a Husky fan, the more you should give. And I know it's painful. I know it's an adjustment, but that's what it's going to take. And the other side of that coin is falling back into that 6-7 win plateau that Washington was at with Steve Sarkisian before Chris Peterson showed up, where you were there, you were getting decent bowl wins, Holiday Bowl, Kraft Fight Hunger Bowl, all that. But Washington has proven they should be playing in the playoffs. They should be playing for marquee New Year's 6 bowl games. And the only way to do that in this modern era of college football is provide the funding to do it. And that's all you can ask for.
I couldn't agree with you more. And they really do have the right people at the helm to make it happen. And the last thing I want to say here before we get out of here is I really like where this is all going. I do think this is all heading in the right direction. And I feel that we're not going to truly see that until this fall, because it felt like even with Kalen early on in 2022, it took winning a couple of games. It took bouncing back after those 2 tough losses at UCLA and Arizona State. It took overcoming a lot of that before it truly became, all right, yeah, no, I'm bought in with this. And I think it can get there. It's just going to take a little time. And Lars, that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason as fall camp gets closer and closer. And the best way to make sure you're up to date on everything it is that we're talking about here, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, on that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never when we post new video. Drop a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star review. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Thursday.